Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all. It's Bear here. And I'd like to welcome you to my YouTube channel, aboxwithnolid, a channel I'm creating not just to bring the awareness of the lived reality of complex trauma, adoption, and removal trauma, but I really want to bring what I've learned over my many decades of my own personal experiences, as well as what I've learned for many years of being a practitioner and as an advocate. Now, yes, this is the next video in the adoption series, and I'm directly following on from the last video when, as I said, where adoptees hit this point where you go, my life is a lie. And I want to step into what I've learned and what I've seen and how things have played out over many years of why adoptions fail. Why is there a point? And I've had numerous adoptive parents reach out to me trying to understand why everything was fine to this point, and then all of a sudden overnight their child they adopted's changed and they become the enemy. I want to try to step out what creates that. When you want to understand how things progress, you've got to go back to the beginning. When you're looking at the fog, when you're looking at the survival state removal creates, that base creates an instability that doesn't go away. When we create an avatar to what we have to become, or what we feel we have to become to be part of that adopted family, that is not based on anything other than a constructed reality or perception created by an infant or young child in a perceived threat state, in an actual threat state from removal. It's constructed. It's not built on biological similarities. It's not built upon familial recognition and the actual connection, where if you're biologically part of this family, there's nothing they can do to make you not part of that family. They can remove you off, but you are still biologically linked to all that family line. Adoption, removal for placement in either foster care or adoption changes all of that. When you're raised outside of a biological family, all those similar mannerisms and facial structures, vocal tones, and all the things I've mentioned in previous videos, because they're not part of that, it creates an instability, a fragility to the foundation of what that child has built as their identity. Now, when you add in to, at some point, that child goes, I am different. When that child begins to recognize that they are different to those raising them, and that difference is because they're not biologically the same, they're in a long-term placement or in an adoption, that takes it back further than in just an altercation between children and adult and parents. It takes back to the questions created around my identity as part of what I'm creating this avatar to be part of this family. It takes it all the way back to removal as far as our nervous system and body is concerned, and all the instability and fear and frustration and fear and anger around that. And that raw emotion in a young child or in an adolescent overwhelms. And that's the fuel. That's this volcano that is brewing. And when that young child hits that point of going, I am different, and then there's the years after that of trying and exploring all these different ways to not be different, trying all these different niches at school and social groups, all these different ways of being and speaking and the ways of dressing and hairstyles and so forth and so forth. All this exploration to try to find, where's my place in this puzzle? It's like you got a piece of puzzle in your hand and you're going through all the different gaps that are there going, where does it fit? And when it's not a biological family, there is no place to fit, because the place has to be created for that puzzle piece to fit. And that's the analogy I want you guys to hold on to for a moment. There has to be a place created. When you look at adoptions that work, you trace it back to the beginning. It comes down to the reasons that couple chose to adopt. And if that reasons were around, we want to give this child a life, and they focus on building the connection with that child, not on their terms, but on the child's terms. Going, I acknowledge we're raising somebody else's child that has been removed. There are traumas, there are stuff there that needs to be worked through. We need to learn this child because it comes from a different biological family. Their mannerisms and behaviors and their vocal tones and all these things are not wrong. We need to learn them to make them part of our family because we've chosen to adopt. Those few adopted parents that do that, they create a place for that puzzle piece to fit. But when a child is placed in an adoptive family and they're expected to meet the adoptive parents' needs, like as I showed in the last video, when they can, when you're dealing with miscarriages and all these kinds of things, and this child is supposed to fix, or this child is going to make me whole, this child's going to fill this void, or save my marriage, or give me purpose. That child has to fulfill those responsibilities. There is no creating a place. There is no puzzle piece or a place for a puzzle piece to fit. Because it's all about shaping the child to fit the place, the spot on that puzzle that's available. Everything comes down to shaping and manipulating and getting that child to be what you need it to be, what the adoptive parents need it to be. And that doesn't work. When that child realizes they're different and they're separate and there is no place for them to fit, they will look outside themselves at school and society for places to fit. And as the altercations start to grow, the intensity of that starts to grow. And if that volcano, the fuel source of removal, has added layers of trauma to it, there's a lot of energy there and a lot of raw energy that in an adolescent is anger. It will only ever come out as anger. And that's where we see the destructive behaviors play out. In our societies today, when we look at the teenagers that are wielding machetes and doing the things that they are doing, they are created through that base. And a lot of them come from broken, highly dysfunctional households. And a lot of them come from the foster care system. And a lot of them come from broken families. And some of them are adopted. They latch onto whatever supports and understands that anger. And unfortunately, in our society, those groups that support or want people to participate that have this fuel source of anger are ones that are destructive. That's the gang and the criminality aspect. That's the risk-taking aspect. And that's what we see play out. To dial it back to where we can work with this, once it hits this point of the division is so vast, you cannot help someone until they admit or acknowledge inside themselves, until we go like, I need help and I need to change and I'm willing to listen. Until that person reaches that point, nothing can be done. It's hope and pray that they get through. I went through this. I know a lot of other adoptees that have done the same. What I'm making this video for is to try to get the information out there before it gets to that point. If you take it back to where those child in that adoptive family were being worked with at 3, 4, 5 years of age, when difficulties started to present, to where the connection was worked on, to where the adoptive family puzzle shaped a piece for that child to fit into, not shape the child to match the piece that they wanted to place that child into, things will be different. The outcome will be different. That is how you prevent this from happening. And I'm not saying that adoptive parents do this deliberately. Where I've always placed my concern, which has motivated the many decades of advocacy work that I've done in this, is the system. Adoption agencies and placement agencies never ever go past the most basic attractive information given to adopted parents that you're getting this kid, it's a blank slate, blah 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 blah. Yes, he'll fill all that hole. They'll feed those beliefs that the adopted parents have, their need to adopt, because they want that child to be placed. They'll justify it that it's very hard to find long-term placement for all these children. But I've sat in meetings with adoption agencies and they refer to the children they're placing as product. The dissociation from the humanistic aspects of that and what is required to understand with the complexities of that. Because it is so devoid, that's where my frustration and issue and who I hold accountable. My adoptive relationship with my adoptive parents was doomed from day one because they were not informed of what was going to happen when they adopted a child that could never have met their expectations or needs, and the adversities that created from there. I know of countless other adoptees that are people that I personally know. They're in the same situation, and they just had that same realization and understanding. There was no way it was ever going to work. And if you observe it from if you were parents and you were placing these two types of children together in the same environment, you go, they would never work. Well, in the adoption scenario, the kid has no choice. Personality dynamics and all there's so much, such a vast amount of understandings that are needed to be done when you place a child. But I'm digressing, but as I said, what I'm trying to get you to understand is words on a pamphlet or a brochure will never explain this. Words of telling an adoptee that, well, they're your mom and dad, they raised you, you should be grateful, will never fix this. People having the empathy to take the time to understand the complexity of this and to be able to intercede with children that are going off the rails in the beginning, not waiting till it becomes such an embedded problem that they cannot be solved. With these teenagers that are going off the rails now in our society, there is no way to rehabilitate them. It'll never happen. The society doesn't have the resources to. On paper, it's possible. But they won't change because they won't feel the need to. When you're looking at the breakdown of adoptees and their adoptive families, focus on the connections. Don't focus on proving whose fault it is. The adoptive parents, regardless of how you feel, you need to understand the steps that were missed that are built to this point. And you are the adults from the beginning. And it's acknowledging those steps that were missed and those understandings that were missed. And it's working where able to open doors of communication to acknowledging those things that were missed, and in the hope that that will create a middle ground to be able to be worked with. Telling a kid, well, we're adopted you, you're part of our family regardless, won't work when we don't feel that we are, when your puzzle doesn't have a place for us, where we naturally fit, where we don't have to become someone to fit. In a biological family, you fit in one regard or another. There is a place for you. Even if the parents are so dysfunctional, there is still a place, because we've epigenetically inherited a lot of those traits. And in the next video, I'll go into some of the repressed fears that come up because of what we've inherited, where we've come from. But that plays another huge part in this. The next few videos, they're kind of all going to group together because I'm trying to get the understanding across. And as I said, in the broadness of it, I'm covering a very large area in fairly short videos, and I'm generalizing quite a bit. But what I want is just that empathetic understanding that this is complicated and that it's not a single event. It's a whole series of events that create a single event. We all look for this one moment where it all happened. Well, that one moment was created by 1,000 others that manufactured that moment, that grew that moment. And once that moment is realized, because there's so many steps to it, it's not easily fixed. And all the steps to it need to be recognized. If you can get hold of that understanding, as an adoptee, it's powerful for us to know that we feel the way we are because it was created from all these steps. For adoptive families, by acknowledging that, you open the door to learning how to bridge that gap and hopefully open lines of communication again. And to our biological family, the same when we're going through the reunion process. This is a hugely complicated mess that, a few sentences on a piece of paper will never explain. A few, pages on a pamphlet will never explain. If we want to make headway in this, we need to understand, not just acknowledge the complexity, but actually immerse ourselves into understanding it. As I said, the next few videos I want to carry through with this theme, and I want to get this understanding across as best I'm able to. But at this point, just understand that there's a lot of steps that lead to these points. And if we work on understanding those steps, we'll get a better, we'll be able to see what is going on. I know it's a little bit all over the place, and I really hope this is starting to make some sense. But I love you guys' comments and feedback. Please be mindful, please be safe, and I'll see you all next time.